afternoon. We'd like to start this session. The session's entitled Leveraging the Dividend. I would just like to say leveraging the dividend or the debit. So I think that the issues are complex. I'd like to say, my name is Martha Brady. I'm a senior associate at the Population Council. We have a great panel today. I'm going to just allow each person to introduce themselves rather than me introducing them. You have their bios here. But we'll start to my right. And each speaker will introduce themselves, have a few words, and then we're going to open up to particular questions. So, Maya, would you like to begin? Sorry, as she's getting ready.
Hi, everyone. It's such a pleasure to be here. I'm wearing a couple of different hats sitting here. I am the founder of the Global Fund for Children. We have been around for nearly 20 years. We invest in innovative community-based organizations serving vulnerable children and youth. We've invested nearly $40 million in NGOs in nearly 80 countries, touching the lives of nearly 10 million children. I'm also co-chair of the board of Echoing Green, which I was an Echoing Green fellow, and we fund social entrepreneurs throughout the world, many of them coming from India now, or doing work in India. And lastly, I'm now the new president and CEO of a group called Society for Science and the Public, and we're best known for our world-class science competitions in science, engineering, technology, and math for young people. So that's what I'm representing.
Okay, thank you. Here you go. And
Hi there, I'm Matthew Spacie. I founded Magic Bus 16 years ago. I also sit on the board of DUSRA, both in the UK and in America. And I've lived in Bombay in India for 20 years now, both initially running a couple of companies and then more latterly driving Magic Bus and ensuring that we're the scale we are at today. My job actually at the moment is handing over from being the CEO of Magic Bus India and now looking at creating new programs across the world. So this year in 3 new countries, and the next 3 years we go into 9 different countries with Magic Bus.
Hi, I'm Vanita Mukherjee, and I'm from New Delhi, India. And I work with the Ford Foundation office in Delhi, and I direct a program called Gender, Sexuality and Reproductive Justice. Before joining Ford, I've been a part of the women's movement, worked on sexual and reproductive health and rights, on movement building, and also on how do you integrate gender into different government programs.
Thank you. So those are our speakers today. And this session is really looking at this large, what we call the youth bulge, the largest group of adolescents in the world, and what happens to them. Both boys and girls influence not only their lives, but their countries and their communities. And we're particularly interested in looking at sort of the potential demographic dividend for India. We're going to hear about that a little bit. But before we do, I think there's a video on the Magic Bus that wanted to be shown. Is that correct? I'm just told. Yeah, so we'll start with this. So, sorry, I don't know it either. Here, so.
You don't know me. I'm just another girl. Like hundreds of others. Thousands. I'm just another face in the crowd. But that's okay with me. Because I know something. I can still make a difference. Because it's my time. It's not easy. I can't do it alone. But every step takes me closer to where I want to be. I have to make a choice every day. So, every day I choose to stand on my own feet. Sometimes the challenges are so big, but I have a responsibility. And I have the confidence to lead from the front. have a plan to be the best I can be. Because it's my time. My time to stand up for what's right. For everyone. My time to give back what I got from others. I know there are some things I can't change. But there are some things I can. There's a way around everything. After all, I have also learnt, led, and grown. Someone made me see my face in the crowd. And now, I want to help others see theirs. I have that courage to follow my heart and mind. Because I know something now. There's no such thing as just another face in the crowd. So yes, it is my time. It's my time to choose. And I choose to make a difference.
Okay. So thank you. Now that we just saw that, Matthew, I'm going to ask you about that program. Can you describe a little bit about how you're working, how that program works, and the inspiration for that, and how you see that? What did you learn through that program?
Martha's being. Can you hear me, everyone? Martha's being very modest because actually, I read an article that she wrote nearly 20 years ago about using mentors and a sport-based program in Africa, which really inspired me to start Magic Bus, actually. So thank you, Martha, publicly for that. So you know, the sort of the background to this video and why we exist is really a story that began in failure, actually. So when I turned up in India as a foreigner, a city like Bombay, which has 25 million people, literally half of that city lives in poverty and half lives in wealth. And, you know, very quickly I wanted to try and get involved in and just to cut a long story short, specifically looking at youth and getting youth re-engaged back into sustainable livelihoods. And one of the first things I did was, through my network whilst I was running a company, was to get the 25 boys that lived outside my office jobs. And every single one of those boys ran away, got sacked, or left their job within 3 months because the station was two stops on the train, or they made me wear a uniform, or they didn't give me the respect I deserved, because these young men didn't have work ethic, or certainly didn't have any context to why they needed to work. And so Magic Bus then, spent 6-7 years developing a program which would take young children at the age of 8 and take them on this 10-year journey from childhood to livelihood to 18. And in that journey, what we've recognized is there are a number of non-negotiable things that a young person has to have in order to have control and choice in their life. The basic stuff, and so I don't go through, but things like going back to being in school, staying in school till 10th, girls being part of the equation, leading healthy lives, and eventually getting the opportunity to either go into further education or into work. The silver bullet about Magic Bus, and last week we programmed to 320,000 children at Magic Bus, is that all our programs are run by youth from the communities that we work in across the 19 states in India. So whilst we have 800 staff, their job is to train and mentor the 8,000 girls and boys that stand up and give 9 hours a week to 50 children living in poverty within their own environment. So really, that's where it started, and I'm really also fortunate to have Maya here as well, because I don't know how many years ago, Maya seeded our Global Fund for Children seeded what was called our Connect program. So, and we'll talk a little bit about why we do this, but essentially at the end of every journey of Magic Bus, every single child gets that opportunity to either go into a vocation, a job, or further education. And the seeds of that were planted with the Global Fund for Children.
Can I turn now to,
Yeah.
to Maya, actually, can speak a little bit about the Global Fund and your work currently.
Sure. So, the Global Fund for Children, when I began it nearly 20 years ago, was really to think about vulnerable children and youth and really backing community leaders and giving them agency and voice. And again, your work informed me in grad school in a very big way. So I was very pleased when I saw you leading this panel. And our work was really about being scouts. I mean, really searching for extraordinary people, really built into their communities and making a bet on their work. And we started really focusing on an area of adolescent girls nearly 10 years ago. And we got involved with the Grassroots Girls Initiative through the Nike Foundation, and Peter and Jennifer Buffett spoke about that. But let me go into a little bit more, and Cynthia Steele is here of the Emerging Market, or of Empower, Emerging Markets Foundation, that this was a group of intermediaries, Empower, Global Fund for Children, American Jewish World Service, Global Fund for Women, and was that it? Firelight and Mama Cash. And we were all intermediaries, and the Nike Foundation created the Grassroots Girls Initiative, and they asked us to really think about building the field and really investing in people and communities working with adolescent girls. And so we funded quite a number of programs throughout India, especially, and I can go into some of those stories, but that's exactly for GFC. But then, that's the bottom of the pyramid, but let's move up the pyramid. And let's talk about young people and the fact that they are a dividend, because they are your future innovators of India and the world, frankly. And my work at Society for Science and the Public is we run world-class science competitions. And one of them is the big International Science and Engineering Fair. And we had 50 kids come from India last year. A third of them won the top prizes for their innovation. And I don't have time, but I could tell you that some of those innovations about making lives better for their communities and the people of India, it's extraordinary. So when we talk about youth, we're not only talking about the bottom of the pyramid, we're talking about the whole potential of young people in a country as extraordinary as India.
Thank you. Very interesting. And we'll get back to this, but I want to bring Vanita in right now. Please, can you talk a little bit about your work as the Ford rep in New Delhi?
Well, I'm not the rep. I'm
sorry.
the program officer. So our work exclusively focuses on young girls. We focus on 11 or 12 to 18, 19-year-olds. And one of the challenges we really face is India is huge. There are millions, and our budgets are so limited. Because when that 500 million that Darren commits every year goes across 10 offices, the budget dwindles, and when it comes to India and other offices as well. So with a very limited budget, how do you reach out and how do you really make a fundamental change? I think someone in the morning, Peter Smitham, mentioned the difference between change and charity. And our strategy, we believe in strategic philanthropy. We call ourselves a social justice funder, which means really going to the root causes of the problem and striking it there, rather than doing what's called a Band-Aid approach. So if that is the complexity, so the way we approach it is that we try and model pilots that can be taken to scale. And one of the ways we've done it with our very limited resources is how do we leverage government programs? And one of the government programs which was launched in November 2010 was called Sabla. Sabla, when translated, means empowerment of young girls. And it was experimented in 200 districts. It was a pilot experiment, bringing a whole lot of different indices of empowerment and seeing how that can be operationalized. And what we have done is to partner with NGOs who have expertise in working on gender issues, to really infuse the government program, to build a certain curriculum, to give technical assistance, to see how that can be leveraged within the program so that fundamentally it begins to really hit hard where it matters. The other issue that we work on very closely is child marriage, and we have really, that is there's a whole panel. I'm sorry I missed. I had a very strategic meeting here, but what we really have discovered is that it's not one strategy. You need a basket of strategies, right from the policy and laws to the community level, and that whole spectrum of starting from the community, but also working on policy and law and the in-between of, all the different structures and systems, that is important. So that's something else we work with. And for us, building a field building or building an ecosystem to support all this work is important. So we support institutes on gender, sexuality and rights for NGOs and organizations. And we also see how can government services be youth friendly in terms of access to sexual and reproductive health for young people. And that is a big challenge in India, because there's a lot of judgment about young people's lives and that they don't, no one considers their sexuality. So there are lots of issues there. How do you make it gender friendly, non-judgmental is the last piece.
Thank you. I think this is each of the panelists has a huge amount of knowledge and experience here that we don't have time to go into great detail. But I would like to have our panel talk a little bit about one of the session is really called, this is about India is the most diverse and one of the largest youth populations in the world. And so what happens to them will matter a lot. And so I'd like to know, ask each of you, do you think that the demographic dividend, as it's called in demography circles, for India will be impede or foster or impede economic growth in India? Oh, it's a tough one.
Well,
okay.
It depends.
It depends. That's right.
It really depends, right?
Mm-hmm.
I am going to say, I know this is a panel and a whole session on empowering adolescent girls, but I think if we want to make the lot of girls' lives better, we have to start talking about young boys and young men in India and the gender imbalance that's going on. There's a great work that's called Bare Branches by a researcher named Valerie Hudson, who talks about birth ratios and how there are more boys than there are girls in areas of India. And if you actually pinpoint where those are, you actually see conflicts arise. And this is something we really need to take seriously, not only in India, but in China and in parts of Africa. And I think that can be ripe for conflict. It can be ripe for disharmony and unemployment. And I think we need to look at community-based groups that are actually working with the needs of boys and young men on gender equality, gender sensitization, but also employment opportunities, which Matthew's doing an amazing job on in Mumbai. I will say one story, that at the Global Fund for Children, when we first began, we had 4 portfolios. And one of the portfolios' names was addressing the needs of vulnerable boys. And I will be very honest with you, 4 years later, our board and I decided this wasn't the right thing to do, that we needed to focus on girls. I actually, in my gut, still think that was a good portfolio that we needed to keep building on and focusing on, because I think this is going to become a bigger and bigger and bigger problem.
Okay, thank you. So gender equity issues, empowering girls and enlightening boys, something like that.
Yes.
Basically working on both sides of the equation. Do you have a comment about the demographic dividend? And will that foster or impede economic growth?
I think
India?
I think we've got so many challenges right now, and I it surprises me actually when I sitting in India how few people talk about this, because and I think the sheer volume of what's about to happen in India can't really be conceived at the moment, and it's because it involves a part of the population mainly that we don't speak to, we can't reach. And there literally is a tidal wave of young people who are growing up in poverty, but they're growing up with the same social and economic entitlement as middle class, upper class people in India. and you can put this back to 900 million mobile telephones, 300 million TVs, the internet, etc. But we've got a generation of young people that are growing up with aspirations that we just can't match. And there's a figure in The Economist a couple of months ago which put the number of, at the current trajectory in India, there's going to be 425 million people who will be under or unemployed in India. 425 million. They're going to be marginalized, they're going to be less educated, they're going to be less healthy, and they're certainly not going to be part of the Indian dream that most of us believe and read about. And so no nation actually can withstand the anger of 423 million people. And so unless we do something radically different in India, it is going to be an absolute disaster of a scale that and it will impact everybody. And this is something that, for the first time, actually, I'm so happy that we have something that middle-class India has to stand up and listen to this, because our daughters are being raped. There is an increase in violence. There is an increase in child abduction. It's starting to impact the way that people lead their lives in India. So I think it is kind of sounds quite revolutionary, but there is something that's got to shift in India, and shift quickly.
Vanita, I'd like your perspective on this.
I think the onus shouldn't be on the young people and to say whether it's going to be a dividend or a disaster. But I think it should be the other way around, to say what kind of economic growth is India pursuing? Does it create jobs? Does it create jobs for young people? And what kind of jobs? Because if you really look, there's such a huge rural-urban divide. In the rural areas, if you look at who is employed, it is just stark poverty driving young people of scheduled caste, the Dalits, the tribals, to work in whatever they get. And again, there's a gender divide when you look at what kind of work they get. So the young men are in casual labor. There's no formal labor. The organized sector offers very little, and it's mostly in non-farm. And if you look at young girls, they are self-employed, mainly in agriculture, working on their family farms, rearing a goat, a cow. And this is where I think we really need to think deeply about when we speak about gender and the differences and all of that, is that there's a strong gender division of labor driving the labor market, where allocation and evaluation of work is divided by gender, what girls can do, what boys can do. You don't have women plumbers, electricians. What is it about these technical skills? Are girls really, are girls inadequate? It's not that. I think that we're not giving them a chance and opportunity to really expand their horizon, deepen their skills, because if you look at jobs and you look at payments, men always get more than women for the same work. Technical skills are valued more, and girls get to work on sewing machines, pickle, papad making, and all of that. So while it's important when there's nothing, I think we really need to break the gender stereotype and look at some of what's called our industrial training institutes in India that offer technical skills and try to really make a difference there by seeing that young girls also get an opportunity to work with machinery, earn better jobs, earn better incomes through better jobs. The other thing that strikes me is that the government is actually quite keen. They have what's called the National Skills Development Policy that they floated in 2009 with the promise that by 2022 there'll be 500 million jobs created. So 75 more than what we are thinking about. But in India, as in everything else, there is good intent, but the implementation is the big bottleneck. And I think we really need to put our heads around that. That is the bottleneck. How can we really try and see what the barriers are and how that can be made a reality? And some of our grants is towards vocational skills building of young girls and trying to break that gender stereotype. And it is not easy, but I think we should walk that hard path.
No, thank you. One of the things that strikes me, this is what demographers always talk about, is sort of when we look at data to broken down by age and gender. So actually understanding the differences between genders and by age group is really important, both in terms of understanding the data, but also for programming. So I think that one of the things that we've talked about a lot, again, at the Population Council is it there are many countries where could benefit from the demographic dividend, India being one, China being another, there's several. But, will the demographic dividend be actualized if we don't, in fact, reach the most marginalized girls and boys? We would argue no, actually, that you won't, that you'll then have this deficit, or the debit, if you like. So if we talk about reaching the MDGs by reaching the MDGs, the most marginalized poor girls or whatever the population. But so I guess the question I have is sort of how do you do that? How do you actually figure out how to reach these most marginalized populations? Because those are the ones where, as you've said, where there are strong gender inequities, whereas there's economic inequities, where I think in urban settings, which are increasing in sort of the informal settlements, that those are the populations that if we don't collectively figure out how to improve their lives, that's where the demographic debit is going to, I think, come up. So I just liked your perspective on that. Vanita.
So we have a very strong focus and a lens of inequality, looking at where are these populations, where are they located. We do a lot of scoping and mapping before we start grant making, and we try and see where is the most need. And the big challenge is that where there is most need, there are very few organizations with capacities, few organizations that can absorb funds and lead the way. But we're also lucky that there are very large NGOs based in Delhi, based in Calcutta, based in Bombay, but who have strong partnership with smaller NGOs in rural areas. So we're looking at partnership models, and that's working very well. And these are the very small groups whose annual budget will not be more than $10,000. But the work they do is phenomenal. It's not that they're reaching thousands. They may reach maybe 1,000, 2,000. But that very key work of working with the poorest, the Dalit, a young girl who's out of school and who may be getting married by the age she's 16, I think that is an important thing. So we try and see strategies of how we can really leverage different models, and that's how we try and reach the most marginalized. It's not easy, but there are ways to do it.
Thank you.
Can I?
Yes. And then I'm going to open it up for questions in the audience.
Yeah, because and a lot of what we talked about today is the scale of the problem, which is unprecedented in India. And, I've heard a lot this sort of the last child talk today, and having sort of been in this work for so long, you want to have as much impact as you can for as little dollars as you can. You actually also have to be quite pragmatic about what you can and can't do, and also try and win where you can win. Otherwise, obviously we all want to solve the problem. And I think one of the issues with India as well is that we haven't urbanized fast enough. I think one of the big problems we've got in India is that we are still very much a rural population, and there aren't the opportunities you'll find in rural India that you'll find in urban India. So I think what we're seeing is mass migration now into the cities, a lot by the young, because they simply won't get jobs if they stay in rural settings. I think the government with NSDC, it's a great concept. It's one of the largest government programs in India at the moment, where it brings private partnership into building assets around vocation training. Last year, they got audited by Accenture, and only 30% of all youth that went through that government vocation, which is free, so every youth is given it's basically a 10,000 grant is paid back to the student, so it's a free 3-month course. Only 30% of those that went through actually got a job. So, I'm very cynical about the current way that we're dealing with youth and employability, because there is this, it seems to me that there is, when you try and deal with poor populations, there's this sense that, okay, if we put up a vocation training center and we put 6 trades around that slum, they're going to be really grateful to us. And, we don't my sense is that these 18-year-olds are no different than your children in this room. They both have different aptitudes, different desires about what they want to do, and we spend so little time trying to work out actually what that young person. There's no human capital there. It's about here's an asset. Be grateful you're poor. You're going to be a tailor whether you're a girl or a boy, and that's your life that you've chosen. So I think it's going to be very difficult with the current response.
Why do you have any comments on this question? Okay, I'd like to just sort of open it up for questions in the audience. Yes, we see one over there. Yeah, right here.
My question is for Matthew. Matthew, I completely agree with you about the 400 million plus youth not having adequate employment opportunities. We at Sneha also work with youth, and one of the things that I believe that while the government needs to create employment opportunities, there is also a problem, as aspirations build of these young boys and girls, there is also a problem in India about dignity of labor. So some jobs are just considered menial and not good enough. How do you think one can, overcome this mental mindset that a lot of our youth have today?
So the response, which I haven't spoken about, what we do at that age, is that we'd have two very important things that go on in a young person's life, and that is we go through a process of guidance and advice to a young person, so they actually get to understand what are the opportunity structures around that environment. And secondly, then what's called a personal development plan. So, Deepika, what do you think you're going to be good at? What would you like to do? And then hopefully go into one of our Connect centers, and we'll work through those. But I think those opportunities. But I think crucially, young people need to be mentored. There need to be a construct around aspiration. Because if I ask, if we do this quarterly survey at Magic Bus where we ask 8,000 young people what they think about life, and it's astounding what comes out. And these are young people that live in villages and in slums, urban slums, and they all think they're going to have a car, in an office job, married and in that nice apartment over there. None of them believe they're still going to be in that slum, especially in urban settings. And so this takes a lot of rewinding and managing those expectations so that people don't then become completely disillusioned. Have that answered you? So the answer is through process. You just expect it. You have to go through a process with a young person in terms of holding their hand and understanding what their needs are and giving them realistic expectations.
Yes, so here.
Thanks. So I guess to Matthew again, I think we need to believe in the mentorship and sort of interjecting ourselves at the age of 18 when you're trying to send them to vocational schools, et cetera. But as a parent, a lot of some of these values, and this happens systemically as they're growing up, right? It's not that we wake up when our kids are 18 and then start talking about these things. So what are some of the things that you do to overcome the fact that these children, for the most part, are coming from environments where they don't see this, they don't see the mentors, they don't see the role models. At 2 they weren't told, or at 15 they weren't told, or at 10 they weren't told that, you're not going to have that car and there are other things to aspire to.
So this is why we're great. I think this is why it's so important to work with younger children. I mean, my experience of working with, just when you start intervention at 17, 18 is, it's a lot harder, because you've already molded the child, and the child has already got he's got into this mind frame. So at Magic, that's not the scalable answer, but at Magic Bus, we'll start at 8, and we'll insist on starting 8. So it's childhood to livelihood. So that mentor guides them right through to the point of 17, 18 when they make that choice. I think the purpose probably of any, and it was great to hear what the Ford Foundation do as well, is that the reason I think we exist is to create a model and a structure that we can put into a systemic use. And the only reason Magic Bus scale, and we talked about 1 million children there, it's irrelevant in India, having 1 million young people in a program. It has to be used to advocate something that's more systemic than that. So the mentoring that we're doing with young children is being sold into government system. And that, for me, is the only way you can. So how do we get into schools and train teachers to be counselors? How do we get our mothers' collectives more active in understanding options for young people, etc.?
Thank you. I think we had a question here, Judith. Judith.
Hi, I'm Judith Helsner, until recently with MacArthur Foundation and now visiting scientist at Harvard School of Public Health. I wanted to just give an example and see if any of you knew about it or wanted to comment on it, of something that both works on gender roles, addresses younger children, and is being scaled up. And that's a project that is basically called the GEMS Project. This is a lovely little manual that they use in schools in Mumbai now, in a whole bunch of schools. And it's basically working on breaking down gender role stereotypes among 12 to 14-year-olds. And it was developed first in Latin America. It was adapted to India in a very tiny little pilot project in a slum, out of school use. Then it was adapted for school use, and it was tested in 45 schools in Mumbai. And now at least core elements of it are being scaled up into, I'm told, 25,000 schools in Mumbai. And it's jumped over across state borders to Rajasthan and Goa. And apparently it's jumping to other countries like Vietnam. So the idea is that the sort of interactive lesson plan that teachers and facilitators have to use throughout the course of 2 years questions kids' attitudes about what it's appropriate for a girl to do or a boy to do, about age at marriage that's appropriate, about when violence is acceptable and that kind of thing. And it results, definitely, it's been evaluated to show at least change in attitudes, and to the extent that you can get behavior in those 2 years in behavior. And I guess I just wonder, my interest is not just finding these examples, but sharing them. And I fear that the good examples that do exist are not yet being sufficiently disseminated to make it possible within India and outside for things like this to jump from one region or country to another. So I guess I have the question of, what about the kind of knowledge management and dissemination that needs to happen?
Good question, Maya.
So I think that's a great thing, and I would love to see Dasra create a hub, like an online knowledge hub of the great practices going on in India. I just think it would be brilliant, because I didn't know about that, but I really am interested in it now. And but I don't know if there is a true place on a global stage where that's occurring, and I certainly don't know. I don't think it's happening in India. Am I could be speaking totally. I don't know, Matthew.
I think that's right. Vanita, do you have wait, let Vanita comment.
I think there are many experiments going on in India. I mean, it's a huge country. You have GEMS, you have UDAN. But also, what about the girls who are out of school? I think these are all in-school programs. And one of our big challenges is to really reach out to those girls, because they don't have access to anything that's happening. And, they're the most isolated, socially isolated, really kept under control by their parents till they're married off. So for me, I think while we work on these other programs, these very creative programs, it's very important to think of the ones who are out of school and see, because some of them really cannot get back to school because it's like 10 years. And, they cannot really get back to grade 1 at the age of 14. So what do you do about that constituency? And that, I think, is a very big challenge in terms of looking at the creative ways of reaching out to them.
I think that's an excellent point. And one of the important points, I think, in that is understanding the different segments, really, of the youth population. Girls who are married, girls who are not yet married but likely soon to be married. So teasing apart those different segments, because I think it's really important that they're actually different constituencies in a way that require different kinds of programs and different kinds of outputs, really. And so that diversity, understanding the adolescent diversity, and from private sector would be markets, basically. It's market segmentation is what it is, really. So understanding that, I think, is actually really important in a country like India or anywhere. But I think that's important for programs as well. So I think we only have a few more minutes here. Did I just see? A couple more minutes. Do we have any other questions from the audience? Okay, then I'm going to ask each one of our panelists to give us, in 1 minute or less, your final thoughts. Wow, I know that's you can gather them first. You can gather them first. Vanita, you have thoughts down there.
Yeah, I think managing aspirations for the young people in India is a huge challenge, and I would really think that we need alternative media because, why is it what Matthew shared with us, that everyone is dreaming of having a car, of a good life, is I think they deserve to dream, but it's also the television which is giving this very glitzy picture. That's what they keep seeing in all the serials. And how do we have alternative programs that sort of depicts, gone are the days when Raj Kapoor had those very socially relevant themes. It's all glitzy in Bollywood. Very rarely you have something that's showing the rural reality, the lived reality of a poor person in the rural areas. It's all glitz. So, we need to really create alternative media, I think, to influence some thinking about how this can be changed.
Thank you. Matthew, any final thoughts, comments?
Sure. I think when you're talking about the dividend and talking about livelihoods and further education and what we're doing with, I think there's two sort of major recalibration points. One is, I think, the way that we view employability and jobs. I think in India we have this massive deficit, not just of the number of people going into work, but also India doesn't have a manufacturing base. We have 12%, I think, of our GDP is manufacturing. It needs to be 25, 30% to even give this young people an opportunity to work. So there needs to be a whole recalibration of how we view the opportunity. And I think there needs to be a recalibration in how we view people living in poverty and their needs and desires, absolutely, to fix aspiration rates, to understand their needs, to ensure that we look at them as human capital rather than this, this problem we have to do to find them a job. And never before, we talked about collaboration and the ecosystem, it has to work together now, because it's no point, and I'm fed up with having conversations with people who say education is the most important thing or gender is the most important thing. They all have to work together simultaneously in order for this to be successful. And, I think, and we know that, so it's a bit stupid really because it still goes on. But I think it's great to start these conversations around collaborative leadership and ecosystems. I think it's absolutely crucial.
Thank you. Maya, last words.
I'll just say that if we're going to improve the lot of adolescent girls, then we really need to look for innovative grassroots programming working with adolescent boys and young men. I think it's critical.
Thank you. I think I'm told to give it a wrap, so I'd like to thank all the panelists, and we'll